all around the world. In Arusha, Tanzania, A to Z textile manufacturing has worked in partnership with us, with UNICEF, with the Global Fund, to create a factory that now employs 7,000 people, mostly women, and they produce 20 million life-saving bed nets for Africans around the world. LifeSpring Hospital is a joint venture between Acumen and the government of India to bring quality, affordable maternal health care to low-income women. And it's been so successful that it's currently building a new hospital every 35 days. And 129 Ambulances decided that it was going to reinvent a completely broken industry, building an ambulance service in Bombay that would use the technology of Google Earth, a sliding scale pricing system so that all people could have access, and a severe and public decision not to engage in any form of corruption, so that in the terrorist attacks of November, they were the first responder and are now beginning to scale because of partnership. They've just won 4 government contracts to build after 100 ambulances and are one of the largest and most effective ambulance companies in India. This idea of scale is critical because we're starting to see these enterprises reach hundreds of thousands of people. All of the ones I discussed have reached at least 250,000 people, but that's obviously not enough. And it's where the idea of partnership becomes so important, whether it's by finding those innovations that can access the capital markets, government itself, or partner with major corporations. There's unbelievable opportunity for innovation. President Obama understands that. He recently authorized the creation of a social innovation fund to focus on what works in this country and look at how we can scale it. And I would submit that it's time to consider a global innovation fund that would find these entrepreneurs around the world who really have innovations not only for their country, but ones that we can use in the developed world as well. Invest financial assistance, but also management assistance, and then measure the returns, both from a financial perspective and from a social impact perspective. When we think about new approaches to aid, it's impossible not to talk about Pakistan. We've had a rocky relationship with that country, and in all fairness, the United States has not always been a very reliable partner. But again, I would say that this is our moment for extraordinary things to happen. And if we take that notion of a global innovation fund, we could use this time to invest not directly in government, though we would have government's blessing, nor in international experts, but in the many existing entrepreneurs and civil society leaders who already are building wonderful innovations that are reaching people all across the country. People like Roshani Zafar, who created one of the largest microfinance banks in the country and is a real role model for women inside and outside the country. And Tasneem Siddiqui, who developed a way called incremental housing, where he's moved 40,000 slum dwellers into safe, affordable community housing. Educational initiatives like DIL and the Citizen Foundation that are building schools across the country. It's not hyperbole to say that these civil society institutions and these social entrepreneurs are building real alternatives to the Taliban. I've invested in Pakistan for over 7 years now, and for those of you who've also worked there can attest that Pakistanis are an incredibly hard-working population, and there's a fierce upward mobility in their very nature. President Kennedy said that those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. I would say that the converse is true, that these social leaders who really are looking at innovation and extending opportunity to the 70% of Pakistanis who make less than $2 a day provide real pathways to hope. And as we think about how we construct aid for Pakistan, while we need to strengthen the judiciary, build greater stability, we also need to think about lifting those leaders who can be role models for the rest of the world. On one of my last visits to Pakistan, I asked Dr. Sono if he would take me to see some of the drip irrigation in the Thar Desert. And we left Karachi one morning before dawn, and it was about 115 degrees. And we drove for 8 hours along this moonscape-like landscape with very little color, lots of heat, very little discussion because we were exhausted. And finally, at the end of the journey, I could see this thin little yellow line across the horizon. And as we got closer, its significance became apparent, that there in the desert was a field of sunflowers growing 7 feet tall, because one of the poorest farmers on earth had gotten access to a technology that had allowed him to change his own life. His name was Rajan, and he had kind, twinkly hazel eyes and warm, expressive hands that reminded me of my father. And he said it was the first dry season in his entire life that he hadn't taken his 12 children and 50 grandchildren on a 2-day journey across the desert to work as day laborers at a commercial farm for about 50 cents a day, because he was building these crops. And with the money he earned, he could stay this year. And for the first time ever, in 3 generations, his children would go to school. We asked him if he would send his daughters as well as his son. And he said, "Of course I will, because I don't want them discriminated against anymore." When we think about solutions to poverty, we cannot deny individuals their fundamental dignity, because at the end of the day, dignity is more important to the human spirit than wealth. And what's exciting is to see so many entrepreneurs across sectors who are building innovations that recognize that what people want is freedom and choice and opportunity, because that's where dignity really starts. Martin Luther King said that love without power is anemic and sentimental, and that power without love is reckless and abusive. Our generation has seen both approaches tried and often fail. But I think our generation also might be the first to have the courage to embrace both love and power. For that is what we'll need as we move forward to dream and imagine what it will really take to build a global economy that includes all of us, and to finally extend that fundamental proposition that all men are created equal to every human being on the planet. The time for us to begin innovating and looking for new solutions across sector is now. I can only talk from my own experience, but in 8 years of running Acumen Fund, I've seen the power of patient capital not only to inspire innovation and risk-taking, but to truly build systems that have created more than 25,000 jobs and delivered tens of millions of services and products to some of the poorest people on the planet. I know it works, but I know that many other kinds of innovation also work. And so I urge you, in whatever sector you work, in whatever job you do, to start thinking about how we might build solutions that start from the perspective of those we're trying to help, rather than what we think that they might need. It will take embracing the world with both arms, and it will take living with the spirit of generosity and accountability, with a sense of integrity and perseverance. And yet these are the very qualities for which men and women have been honored throughout the generations. And there is so much good that we can do. Just think of all those sunflowers in the desert. Thank you.